upon the earth to show you how much I love you. I'll stir up all affections in my heart to show you how much I love you. I will sing, I will dance upon the earth to show you how much I love you. I'll stir up all affections in my heart to show you how much I love you. We will sing, we will dance upon the earth to show you how much we love you. We'll stir up all affections in our hearts to show you how much we love you. We will sing, we will dance upon the earth to show you how much we love you. We'll stir up all affections in our hearts to show you how much we love you. When I look at the sky, when I look at the heavens, every star in the night, you've set it in motion. I'm amazed, I'm undone for all you've made and all you've done. How can we know you? You're so great. We can't explain you. You're so kind. We're amazed, we're undone for all you've made and all you've done. For all you've
When we feel alone and overwhelmed, afraid of what's unseen and filled with fear, darkness tries to overcome our souls, yet your hand approaches, pulls us near. We won't shrink back, fear and doubt are vanquished in the light of you. God, you're greater, your freedom's superior. Our hope is real, our hope is you. The claws of doubt have come to pull us back, to tempt, to hurt, to turn our hearts away. But dark has said to understand your power. Our God dismantles doubt, his strength displayed. Eternal life is now, it begins today. We won't shrink back, fear and doubt are vanquished in the light of you.
God of scarcity. Your goodness flows abundantly. You did not come here to condemn, but to save us, heal our brokenness. Jesus, fill us with your fullness. We want to know how deep and wide, long and high is your love, your love. Jesus, fill us with your wonder and give us strength to comprehend the great extent of your love, your love. We're not just praying to the sky. You quell our doubts and flood our minds. With confidence we seek your face, knowing we are drenched in Jesus' grace. Jesus, fill us with your fullness. We want to know how deep and wide, long and high is your love, your love. Jesus, fill us with your wonder and give us strength to comprehend the great extent of your love, your love. Jesus, fill us with your fullness. We want to know how deep and wide, long and high is your love, your love. Jesus, fill us with your wonder and give us strength to comprehend the great extent of your love, your love. We want to want you more. Fill us with your heart. We need to need you more. Fill us with your heart. We yearn to be amazed. Fill us with your heart. We long to be undone. Fill us with your heart. Now drown our guilt and fears. Fill us with your heart. Come meet us in our tears. Fill us with your heart. Remind us of the cross. Fill us with your heart. Fill us with your heart. We want to want you more. Fill us with your heart. We need to need you more. Fill us with your heart. We yearn to be amazed. Jesus, fill us with your fullness. We want to know how deep and wide, long and high is your love, your love. Jesus, fill us with your wonder and give us strength to comprehend the great extent of your love, your love. Jesus, fill us with your fullness. We want to know how deep and wide, long and high is your love, your love. Jesus, fill us with your wonder and give us strength to comprehend the great extent of your love, your love.
Hey, what's up, Fellowship? I'm Nate. I'm the Worship Arts Director here, and today we have an AMA, Ask Me Anything, with Pastor Robert. He's currently holding the camera, but he's about to give it to me because we're going to ask you some questions today. Are you ready, Pastor Robert?
I am ready. Nate didn't say this. I have not seen a single question. I have tried to find them. I have tried to hunt them down from him. I have tried to get them out of him somehow, and Nate has remained silent.
But I have all the questions right here. Oh, but you can't see them yet.
Yeah, so I don't know what's coming.
What does the best is yet to come mean? You always put it in all your emails, and you have a mug that says the best is yet to come that you just put your Starbucks in. What's it mean?
That's a great question. There's a couple things behind why the best is yet to come. One, I had heard the saying when I was really kind of growing in my faith, and I liked it, and I didn't know why I liked it. But then it really began to have a bigger meaning for me personally, and I believe the vision of fellowship. And it comes really from when Jesus says, in this world you will face troubles, but don't worry, I've overcome the world. And throughout his teaching, throughout the gospel message, it's about a hope that is coming. It's about a return of a Savior. And so even though this world has a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges, even though we will face challenges as a church, the best is always yet to come because we have the ultimate prize in Jesus. And so it's really a message of hope and a message of looking ahead to what Jesus is going to bring. So I like to say it a lot, like in every email.
All right, Pastor Robert, I'm going to start off with some easier questions, and we're going to get harder as we go along. So here's a few softball ones. My favorite question maybe on this entire list here. What is your favorite Fellowship MSC song?
Ooh, I'm glad I actually just got asked that. That's an easy one. So I might not be the majority here. Mine is All You've Done. So I just like that song. I've liked it since I first heard it. I actually, even this morning, was reading in my Bible, and it just came across that exact psalm. And so I just love that one and really enjoy it. So, yeah.
And what psalm is that?
Psalm 8.
It's a good psalm.
It is. There's actually 3 questions in that psalm, 3 big life-challenging questions. And one of them is about the stars in the sky and everything, like all of creation. So I personally relate to that psalm and that song a lot because I've talked about it in messages before and stuff, but to me, astronomy, the stars, space, it just humbles me and makes me realize God is just so great. So,
what does your schedule look like throughout the week?
Oh, that's a good question. Man, I'm going to say that to everyone. That's a good question.
It's all right.
I mean, one thing I say is I don't feel like as a pastor I ever work a day in my life because I say it's more of being able to just be in ministry with people than it is kind of punching a clock, let's say. You know, Sundays, you'll see me on Sundays. That's pretty predictable. But during the week, it's meeting with different people, meeting with our staff, meeting with city leaders, meeting with other church leaders, meeting with people in our community. Just today, for instance, was in pretty early this morning, getting through emails and different correspondence, then meeting with Nate, you here, having this. Then I'm heading off to 2 more meetings after this, both off-site at different churches. So trying to figure things out for what we can do as a church in the future. So today, even today I'm having a meeting about what we could be doing for Thanksgiving to help Macomb County. So you never know. That's kind of a day in the life.
So it's sort of like different week to week.
Yeah, I mean, Monday is typically my message day. I try to be about 2 months out in message prep. And so Monday is really kind of the day where I begin to really digest the previous Sunday and say, all right, now let's put the details together for the next Sunday. So that's my one day I guard for that. Tuesday, I try to set all my meetings, have as many meetings as I can. Wednesday is kind of a hybrid of doing some office and message work that I need to finish up. And then Thursday is my catch-all day. You know, we all need those days where we have to catch up from everything. And I try to take Friday and Saturday off with the family, but it all depends on the week. So.
Mondays being message prep day, that's a good segue into some of these next questions. So the first one I'm going to ask, who would you say your favorite disciple is?
Ooh, like, you're talking like a Jesus, one of the 12
Yeah, one of the
disciples.
original 12 apostles, I think is what they're referring to.
Can I have a couple different ones?
You're the pastor.
Could I have 12 of them?
No.
I'm just kidding. I really actually like Thomas. You don't see much of him in the Gospels, but there's a couple things. One, I love his doubt and his question. I think it's so easy for us to feel like we have to have such an assurance of everything and never question and never doubt. And yet, despite being with Jesus, despite seeing all that Jesus did, he still even doubted when he had rose from the grave. And so I think he just poses asking a lot of questions, which is something I like to do, is just ask a lot of questions. I also like Thomas because as it goes, I mean, we didn't canonize the Gospel of Thomas, and so some of the stories isn't officially in the Bible, but we do know that he went to India, particularly Chennai, India, and I have a personal heart for that city and that part of our world, and so it's kind of a cool correlation there that he was one of the disciples when they all kind of dispersed. We don't talk about the ones that went to Asia that much, but he was one of them.
And so let's keep with the Bible theme here, especially for these next few. What is your favorite chapter of the Bible?
So we're not talking book. You're talking...
Not book, not verse, chapter. This was very specific.
It's a close one. So I want to say my gut, if I were to tell you what my first reaction is, it's Ephesians chapter 2. Because particularly in there, it has a lot of meaning to me where it says, for by grace you've been saved through faith, not by works, so that no man can boast. And so that is, to me, a huge statement, and that chapter kind of encapsulates all of that. So that would be my gut. But you know, the other one that I always come to is also another grace themed one, and that's Romans 8. And I'm sure people have talked about that quite a bit. And that comes to mind. This is really weird, but I'm going to give you 3. The third is Revelation 1. And the reason that one is one of them is because for a long time I was scared to read the book of Revelation. In fact, even for years, I put it off. I was so nervous of it. I was so scared of it. I was so overwhelmed by the thought of the end times. You know, we hear all of that about Revelation. But in Revelation 1, it says that you'll be blessed by reading it. And I just, like, when I read that for the first time, I was like, what have I been holding back? Like, God wanted me to be blessed by reading this, and all of us too. And so I think just the blessing in Revelation 1 and the assurance that it's all okay is something to hold on to.
Now, if you could write a book of the Bible, what would you name it?
Well, I can't write a book of the Bible, so can we go to the next question?
So let's put you back in 67 AD. Instead of Jude getting the honor of getting to write the second to last book, they give it to you, and they say, you get to name it. What do you name it?
But see, they didn't even name it. They wrote letters, or they wrote things down, and we then named it later on.
You were at the Council of Nicaea in the 8300s.
So now I get to choose. I really think I would just call it the Good News.
The Good News?
The Good News, yeah.
So you'd add like a 5th gospel. You could, hey.
I would take the word gospel and just say the good news, because I don't think an unbeliever even knows what gospel means. I don't even know if some believers know what gospel means. I think
It's like a nice type of music.
yeah, like so I think I would just make it simple. I mean, that's the whole message that I hope is told.
So, okay, the book of Hebrews, who really wrote it?
That is a good question because it's so debated. So there's parts of Hebrews that would indicate it has themes that are similar to the writings of Paul. But what we see is Paul often will pen his name in it. And so my off-the-wall theory is it was Timothy and he forgot to write his name in it. But that's my off-the-wall theory. Because, you know, he kind of, and Paul had this disciple type relationship. So maybe, who knows? Don't quote me on that. That was just kind of a fun off the wall one.
No, not too hard of a take, yeah.
But I really don't know. There's some pastors I talk to who even say it could have been the one woman who authored a book of the Bible and didn't pen their name.
I've heard that theory too, yeah.
We don't know. So it's just unknown.
The next question is, do you think that some of Paul's letters, and that's in quotes, could possibly be fakes?
I mean, my gut says no, right? I mean, I look and I see the Bible as God's word. I believe God's hand was in putting the Bible together. I believe all of that. So I don't think they were fakes. I'm trying to understand maybe where that question is coming from at the core of.
I think they might be asking if every single one of the letters was actually written by who they said they were written by, or what tradition says.
I mean, the Paul letters, most of them are pretty easy because Paul says, I, Paul, write to you. So, I mean, that's where I think we get that authorship there. So I don't think they're fake, no.
What would you say to someone who wonders how the books of the Bible got to be the books of the Bible? Like, what makes those any more special, or what makes those the inspired books?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good question because I think of how we even had talked about the Gospel of Thomas. And so you can just Google search Gospel of Thomas and it'll come up. And I really think it came down to the Catholic Church, for lack of a better term, that really canonized the Bible. And so a lot of our understanding of that is saying that, yeah, God was in all of that. God was moving through those people that gathered to assemble the 66 books and canonize them. The Old Testament, that's pretty set in stone because that's our Hebrew Bible. It was really cool in seminary. I was able to see one of the Baghdad scrolls and also was able to see some Dead Sea Scrolls. And so something that people might not sometimes realize is we have found scrolls that predate Jesus, but are like detailed exactly, Old Testament detailed exactly to what we have today. The Old Testament is one of those that it's kind of an easy one. The New Testament is where it becomes a little trickier because even Paul wrote, there's so much that can't be contained in this book. Or was that John? John, I think, even wrote that in his end of his gospel, John wrote. And there's so much more that can't be contained. It's amazing to think how much more was written but wasn't put in the Bible. So back to the Gospel of Thomas. You will read that and it is just an off-the-wall thing of Jesus. Like, it's like Jesus as a teenager. And he realizes
crazy stories, yeah.
He realizes he has this power of God, and it's like how he utilizes it is, let's say, not in sync with what we would see in the Gospels.
Doesn't he like strike down a kid at one point?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mad at him.
Yeah, and then you have to think, well, would Thomas have even been there when Jesus was a kid? Like, it wasn't like from John the Baptist or James or someone like that. So those are the things that I'm sure they met, and they're like, okay, this really probably is off the wall, not there.
Probably didn't happen.
Yeah, it probably didn't happen. And so that didn't make the Bible because, it just didn't seem to fit Not that they were like programming what fit, but if it was kind of off the wall like that, what the heck?
Didn't seem inspired by the Spirit.
Yeah, we could say that.
And then before we get off of the subject of Paul, we have one more Pauline question. Is the Apostle Paul sexist?
So is the Apostle Paul sexist?
Loaded question.
No, I would say no. Let me just put it that way, no. And the reason I can confidently say no is it's very contextualized, his writings. And he even says in Romans, I believe it's chapter 10 or 12, that this is for all people, that we all once were this way, but now as believers we're this way, we're transformed. And he doesn't say men are the only ones who's transformed. And over in his writings, he has a very inclusive message of the gospel. It's not like this is only for men. I believe that question is coming out of some of his writings, maybe being to Timothy, for instance, where we see him kind of talking about women not teaching men and things along those lines. Maybe that's where the question's coming from. And I believe that has a lot to do with context. So take, for instance, recently I was in Dearborn. You guys know that. And in that context, if you are to teach English to people of the Islamic faith who come from the Middle East, you separate the men and the women. So the men go in one door, a separate door for men, and women go in a whole separate door for women. And they're in separate parts of the building. So if you were to actually teach men and women at the same time, you can't teach them in the same room. And so if we take the culture that we even see prevalent in the Middle East today, which is a very patriarchal culture, and you can, if you want to get a taste of that, just go to Dearborn and spend some time there, and you'll see how patriarchal it is. I then take that and I think, wow, maybe there was something similar in the New Testament era. And so there's things of balance that Paul was trying to figure out for the churches when it came to what they were doing. Because, I mean, frankly, the gospel of Jesus changed their whole society upside down. And so managing that, I think, was a challenge. And so a lot of that was written in a context. I always say, I know for certain Jesus wasn't sexist at all. One, he had women followers. Two, the gospel, he is risen, was given by women. They were the first ones to actually see the empty tomb. I don't think Paul would be sexist in that sense. I just think it's maybe a contextualized cultural thing.
It's a good answer. We're at about the halfway point, so if you want to drink some coffee, I'm going to drink some coffee.
All right.
We got to keep the energy flowing here. It's such a big mug.
It's good. It kind of cools it off a little faster, though, you know.
Who got you that mug?
So one of our worship leaders, Sarah Holton, got me this mug.
Oh, I don't actually know if I realized that.
Yeah.
Well, shout out to you, Sarah. All right, as we keep going here, we're going to start to get into some even more deeper topics.
Oh, man.
And we've already been scratching the surface, but it's going to get even better. What is your position on the miracles recorded in the Bible? Did they really happen, starting in Genesis and throughout?
All right, we're going for them. The short answer is yes. I do believe in the miracles. There's a couple reasons why. One, if I start from the very beginning, in the beginning God created. If I start from that standpoint, I have to come to the conclusion that God created everything out of nothing. And so if God created everything out of nothing, that means that God existed before anything and will exist forever. Like he never has a beginning and never has an end. And so I think what we wrestle with as humans is we know everything from a timeline, a finite beginning end. We know things in cycles. The sun's going to come up in the morning, it's going to go down, and the moon is going to rise type of thing. We separate the day from the night and all of those things. And we just have those rhythms in our world. We know that it's summer, but after summer comes fall, and then comes winter, and then comes spring, if you're tracking with me. And so we know what's predictable, let's say, and yet God in creation itself did something unpredictable. And so if I start right there and can say God created, that opens my mind to whatever else. Then is there really a flood? Those kind of questions. Absolutely. I mean, he's God. And so, yeah, he could flood the earth. And he could say, you know what, I'm not going to do that again. And so do I believe he did? I do. A lot of that happens as I look to even the teachings of Jesus. So then let's go to the miracles of Jesus. If Jesus really rose from the dead, which I believe he did, then why couldn't he heal a blind man? Why couldn't he make the lame walk? Why couldn't he heal the leper? If he could raise himself from the dead, anything is possible at that point. And so if I just work backwards from the resurrection, none of it is impossible. Jesus even says, humanly speaking, it's impossible. What is this, Matthew 5, I believe? Part of his Sermon on the Mount. Humanly speaking, this is impossible, but with God, anything is possible. And I think if you hold on to that, it's so true. And even thinking through some of the crazy stories, right? Let's talk about Jonah. There's parts of our stories that I think are, we have to take and say, maybe there is part of it that is telling something bigger than the actual just events. But was Jonah someone? Did he exist? Well, Jesus referred to Jonah. He even refers to the 3 days to show what he would do with 3 days. And so if we look at that and if we believe Jesus is Jesus, then all that other stuff has to be true too. And so it's, I think, missing God to discredit those miracles as really being real.
Is there a scenario you think where some of those stories could have been similar to Jesus's parables, where they maybe weren't historical in the sense of like a history book, but they were still written with a spiritual purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Jonah is a great example of it. The story doesn't even conclude. We don't even see the conclusion of Jonah. And maybe that's intentional, because I think in a lot of ways we're to put ourselves in that story. Him just not wanting to go to Nineveh, but God calling him to Nineveh over and over again. And isn't that what we often do in our world, in our life? We don't want to go where God calls us to go, and yet he is going to keep pulling us until we actually get it. I just hope I don't have to be swallowed up in a whale. But I think that there's different contexts and different styles of writing. So we definitely have to take that into account in understanding it. So one of the things that I was taught very early on in seminary is something called hermeneutics. And I had a professor that he just drilled it in our head over and over again, that do not treat God's word like shrapnel of a grenade. And I just didn't understand it. And so maybe you won't understand it after I explain it. But it took me a while, and it took me actually years of processing it in order to completely get it. And what he was saying is, we so often chapter and verse things, and we take things and we just kind of make them really small into a sentence or a statement. And we take that and we apply it to our life. And that's absolutely, I think, a good thing to do. You want to meditate on Scripture, apply it to your life. But you're missing the context of the entire verse. For instance, Jeremiah 29:11, we put that on all of our graduation cards and everything. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future.
Oh yeah, it's my mom's favorite verse.
But if you look at the context around it, you see that it was really within a 70-year time frame. It wasn't actually talking to us today. It was very contextualized to the writing of Jeremiah. Now, can it talk to us today? Absolutely. I think that encourages us, it helps us. But when we read Scripture, we have to understand some of it is written more from a poetic standpoint, right? Take the Psalms, for instance, which have a melody to them even, so they could be sung. You take, let's say, Isaiah, and while they're very prophetic, we have to ask, where is it prophetic to? Well, I would say that most of Isaiah is pointing to Jesus. And so it depends on the different contexts of it. Take the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. We believe those are passed on by oral tradition. Who wrote them is the question. And so we give credit to Moses for writing those, really. But, well, then how do we know about Abraham? And how do we know about Noah? And how do we know about creation itself and Adam and Eve? Well, that's all stories that were told from family to family, passed down over time. And so I think we have to always think about that as how do we get to what we have.
What is the biblical view regarding cremation?
It's a good question because honestly, I haven't pondered it until now. So I think of Job, who throws ashes on himself and dust, and he says, "From dust I came, till dust I shall return." I don't think that there's a right and a wrong way. We're told that with Jesus' return, we're given a new spiritual body. It's never promised a new earthly body. I've never seen that. It's a spiritual body. Now we know there's bodies, especially if we look at Revelation and see who's around God's throne. We see that there's something noticeable. When it says every nation, every tribe, every tongue, well, we have to have different languages. We have to have different colors of skin and different tribes in order to actually have that picture be a reality. And so we have bodies, but they're spiritual bodies. Whether we're cremated or buried, our bodies are ultimately returning to dust. But we do know that there is hope and that Christ takes those ashes and he makes us new.
You're doing great here. We have 3 questions left, and this one I would say is maybe the final hard question, having to do with the church and the Bible. Why do Christians seem scared to talk about sex in the church?
So that's actually one of those questions that I've personally been wrestling with a lot lately. As I looked back on my life, I thought of a college roommate that I had. He was the all-star youth group kid. I had a couple of them like this. And the one who took a rose as a senior in high school and promised purity and all of these things in his life. But in college, we saw that all of that kind of went out the window. And so the way I processed that and looked at that is I don't think that the church talks about sex enough. It's one of those taboo topics that everyone thinks about or talks about at some point in their life, but then we're scared to have it enter the church. And I think that there's a couple reasons. One, I think that it's a sin that people are scared to talk about and that there could be struggle with, that they're scared to talk about. And that often will hold us back from wanting to talk about it. But we see, even in the scriptures, Jesus talked about it. I mean, he looks at the woman at the well and he says, actually, you've had 5 husbands. He reaches out to the prostitute. I mean, think about that. We see sexual things talked about in Paul's writings. He talks about how you were giving into, and he gives a litany of sexual sins. And you can't read the Old Testament and avoid some of the weird stuff that happens in it. I mean, just spend some time in Song of Songs and that's enough. I mean, or just look at some of the things like what happens after Noah gets off the ark. That's not in our children's stories.
I hope not.
It goes a little bit south from the pretty ark with all the nice smelling animals and everything that we make toys out of. It goes south after that. And I think we do need to talk about those things more. I just think it's one of those topics that is almost taboo. And so that's where I think as churches, at least recently I've been really processing this, as churches, when we talk about it less or we make it just a big event is the only time we talk about it, we only set people up for disappointment, letdown, and ill-preparedness. And so it gets back to that college example. We can have that big aha moment, but was it really, or was it kind of a manufactured moment? And so I think it just has to be a part of our regular discussion of what does living a Christ-fearing life look like? And that's where, when it comes down to all of it, I'd ask this simple question: what does love require of me? What does love require of me in my relationships? What does love require me when it comes to sexual things. And so if we boil it down to that, I don't need to have a conversation when Jacob's older with him about, hey, why should you really save yourself, let's say, for one woman? Or why should you do that? I don't need a chapter and verse him. I can say, what does love require of you? And does love require you to love your future spouse and your girlfriend's future spouse well? Absolutely it does. And so that means don't do anything to harm their future relationships. And so even just thinking through that lens, I think it changes the way we view it, but we need to have that conversation more. We're kind of having it now, and I'm sure all of you will hold me accountable in a few years when I have to have it.
All right, last two questions here. What is a way that God has used suffering in your life to teach you more about Him?
Yeah, I don't want to overuse the same stories, but I think every time I suffer, I see God in a fresh way. I was experiencing a breakup of what I thought was a serious relationship at the time. And it was during that I just felt so disappointed by God. And so I tried to run from Him. I tried to do everything I could to just basically say, forget you, God. Like, it didn't work out. But what I saw is in my running, I actually found Him. I found His heart. I found who He was. I found friends that challenged me and called me out for what God wanted me to be called out for. But it took me being in a place of heartbreak in order to actually find a deeper relationship with the Lord. I take the time that I lost my father unexpectedly. And I'll never forget getting that phone call early in the morning. And Jessica, we were just married, I think maybe 4 or 5 months. And she was going to go off to a CE course. And I got that call and I just dropped to the floor. I didn't even know how to handle it because I'm an only child, so I didn't have a sibling or anyone that I could lean on. It was now just me and my mom, and that reality just hit me. And I remember, though, driving to my parents' house and just singing the doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Praise all you creatures here below. And it was a time of suffering that actually turned my eyes heavenward. It turned me straight to God. And the only reason I got through that day and the days to come was from the peace that only God could give me. I don't know how I would have done it without Him. I don't know. I really don't. I've seen people lose their parents and they resort to alcoholism or they resort to drugs and they resort to all these different avenues. And I could have very easily been that way, I think, if I didn't have that hope in Jesus. I think of the time that we found out that Jacob was possibly going to be a stillborn. And I remember sitting at a hospital before all these doctors and them asking if we'd consider abortion as an option and me really having to test my faith. I remember looking at Jessica and just her face and in the conversations as she thought about what it would be like to carry a child for months and maybe not even have a child that's breathing on the other end. Those are times where you definitely wrestle with God. You question God. I remember the time where Jacob was born and we were called away from our previous church, but we had no clue that Fellowship was our next church. And for 3.5 months, we went on faith with no income at all, except the little side jobs I could pick up. But that was the best time of our life. Because we saw what God was doing to actually form our family and develop a bond there. So there's things that I think in those moments where things aren't going as we would have planned, God always is showing Himself even more faithful. So those are kind of a few of the stories. I mean, I could go on. I would say every year is full of times of suffering and pain. But I almost look forward to those times, as weird as that sounds. I'm careful not to pray for those times sometimes because,
you're not like a masochist for suffering.
Yeah, I don't want it to sound like that. But there's a reward in it. There really is.
It's a really good perspective. As we're going into our final question, that's sort of what I want to ask you about your perspective. What is one thing you would tell younger you? I know it's very broad, so take that however you want to.
Well, I mean, most people think I am still pretty young, so let me ask them, what would you tell me? No, here's the good thing. Always have a mentor. From the time I was young, I looked up to older people, and I intentionally built relationships with people who were older or more advanced in years than me. And I think it boded really well. Because I think sometimes we don't look at what we did well. And so I would say have a mentor. I hope that, if you're even just entering your teenage years or you have a teenager, make sure that they have mentors in their life that aren't just you. Because I think that's been a critical role, at least in my life, is I've always had mentors. I've always had people I could lean on and go to. And the names change or the faces change, but the mentor is always there. And so that's one thing. The other thing I would tell a younger me is don't worry so much about what people think. That was my big life struggle for a long time. I was so worried about the opinions of others. I was so worried about getting their approval. And I'd be lying or remiss to say that I don't still struggle with that at times today. But the reality is that gets you nowhere because all you do is then serve them. The best thing you can do is say, how can I live submitted to the Lord today? And I would tell myself that. And when I make mistakes now, I wish I told myself then not to beat myself up so badly. There were times where I would make some mistakes and I'd wallow in my misery of that mistake. And I think there's a lot to learn from that and actually reflecting on it. Don't take every mistake and use it as an opportunity for growth, absolutely. But don't just wallow in it or just kind of get caught in that depressed state with it. But look at how God's mercies are new every morning, and every day He has something new for us. So.
Well, I want to thank you, Pastor Robert. Is there anything you want to leave the good people of Fellowship Chapel with?
I just want to tell you guys how much I love you all. I know I can't call everyone or talk with everyone regularly, but honestly, my phone is always open. And if I don't answer, I will call you back. Please, Nate will put my phone number in here. I give you permission. The whole world can contact it. I mean, if Bob Goff can put his phone number, I'm not even close to Bob Goff, so I'll...
Okay, you see that phone number on the bottom of your screen right now?
Yeah, no, honestly, I want you to be able to feel free to ask me any questions, be able to come to me with anything. I will tell you I'm no expert. There's times where I have to wrestle myself, but I really do love each and every one of you. I feel like God has us on a journey as a family of His, and so I also want you to know that He has plans for each of you too. I really feel my calling as a pastor here is to empower and equip and encourage the church to be the church, and so God has big plans to use you.
All right, I'm going to give the camera back to Pastor Robert now because we're going to conclude up here. First of all, thanks for tuning in online with us today. If you want to support what we're doing as a church, ministry-wise, you can text 84321. That would be amazing to give toward what we're doing, and we would very much appreciate it. Invite someone to come to church next week. We're finishing up our 3-week series, 3 weeks, 3 Convos, where Renee Petruskevich and myself will be having a convo on worship. What is it? We're going to be going back and forth, talking through different things, asking each other different questions. It's going to be a good time, and you won't want to miss that. But besides that, like I said before, thanks for joining us today. You can check us out online, fellowshipchapel.net, or our socials at @formacomb. And we would love to connect with you. Give Robert a call, give him a text. He really does want to connect with you. What you see on videos like this or on stage on Sunday is the real deal. He doesn't put on any sort of facade or mask or face. He is who he is, and I love that about him. So I hope you have a great week. May the Lord bless you, keep you, make His face shine upon you, and we'll see you next week.